Let us discuss about hyperkalemia, its causes, investigation, and management in emergency room. Hyperkalemia is defined as a serum potassium more than 5.5 milliequivalents per liter. The most common cause for hyperkalemia in emergency room is acute or chronic renal failure. If a patient with renal failure present to ER with bradycardia, remember that it can be mostly due to hyperkalemia. Then potassium sparing diuretics like spironolactone, hypoaldosteronism, AC inhibitors or ARBs, trimethoprim, pentamidine, these are antibiotics. So the most common cause here is renal failure, then potassium sparing diuretics, hypoaldosteronism, ACE or ARB, trimethoprim and pentamidine. These are common causes for hyperkalemia. In that, most important is always renal failure. Now, some patients can develop hyperkalemia because of increased intake of potassium, especially when the patient is having renal failure, like IV fluids containing potassium like Ringer lactate, KCl, high potassium containing food or drugs, like a patient who takes fresh fruit or fruit juices and patient is already having renal failure, that can aggravate hyperkalemia. Packed cell transfusion can also produce hyperkalemia. This is due to hemolysis and release of potassium when it is infused. Tissue breakdown, this is one of the most important cause for hyperkalemia in trauma patients. Rhabdomyolysis, patient can develop hyperkalemia. Bleeding into body cavities, hemolysis, all these things can produce hyperkalemia, but one thing we should remember is normal kidney is capable to remove excess potassium from the body, how much ever it increases. But if there is renal failure, whether it is acute or chronic, all these factors can increase the potassium, because kidney is the main organ which can remove potassium from the body. If kidney is failed, then potassium storage in the body can increase. So there will not be any regulation of potassium balance in our body. Now another important condition which can produce hyperkalemia, so shift of potassium out of cells. Shift of potassium into the cells produce hypokalemia, and shift of potassium outside of cells can produce hyperkalemia. Metabolic acidosis can produce hyperkalemia. Like this, metabolic alkalosis can produce hypokalemia. Hyperkalemic periodic paralysis is a channelopathy where the patient is having hyperkalemia because of shift of potassium from the cell. Same like that, hypokalemic periodic paralysis is also there. The potassium can suddenly shift inside cells, can produce hypokalemic periodic paralysis. Beta blockers is that normally it does not occur in a routine patient, but beta blocker toxicity can produce hyperkalemia. Digoxin toxicity can also produce hyperkalemia. So these are the causes for shift of potassium out of cells. Here potassium in the body is normal, but shift of potassium is abnormal in the body, so that suddenly potassium can increase in the intravascular compartment. Now we will see the clinical features. Most of the clinical features in hypokalemia and hyperkalemia are all similar. Both hypokalemia and hyperkalemia can produce muscular weakness. Patient can have sudden weakness of muscles like ascending paralysis. So patient can have muscular weakness, hyperreflexia. Some patients develop muscle weakness of respiratory muscles, they develop respiratory arrest. Bradycardia is one important clinical finding you will get in hyperkalemia. That's why first itself we discussed that a patient who is having renal failure presenting to emergency room can be mostly because of bradycardia. Other types of presentations also common in different type of presentations also you can see, like patient can have uh, uh, like acute pulmonary edema, pericardial effusion. These are different presentation of renal failure, but bradycardia is one of the important feature of renal failure because of hypokalemia. Cardiac arrhythmias can occur in some patients. Cardiac arrest also can occur in severe hyperkalemia. Now, according to potassium levels in patient's blood, we can get some ECG changes, because when we ask for potassium levels in routine settings, it may take another 2 to 3 hours. If there is a point of care instrument, we will get it fast. Otherwise, ECG will help you to pick up whether patient is having hyperkalemia or not. Tall peaked T wave. One of the important findings of ECG in hyperkalemia is tall peaked T waves. These T waves we can see in most of the leads. That is very important. Tall peaked T waves in most of the leads of ECG, then it is mostly hyperkalemia. Short QT interval, sometimes it can produce arrhythmias also. Then depending on the high levels of potassium, other changes like 7 to 8 milliequivalents, loss of P waves, then widening of QRS complex can occur. 8 to 10 milliequivalents, QRS widens and merges with T wave like a sine. So you can remember it as it is like a sine. So sine wave can occur. More than 9 milliequivalents, ventricular tachycardia, atrial fibrillation, cardiac arrest. But remember, if any patient with renal failure coming with very tall T waves or wide QRS complex, think that this patient can have hyperkalemia. In that, most easy to diagnose finding in ECG will be very tall peaked T waves. Then bradycardia also can be seen in many patients. Now you can see here in this ECG very tall T waves in all the leads you can see. So tall T waves in only few leads are not very commonly seen in hyperkalemia. That can be due to hyperacute MI, like tall T waves in V1, V2, V3, V4, maybe anterior wall myocardial infarction. But here in all the leads, if you are getting very tall T waves, we have to suspect hyperkalemia. Now other ECG changes we have already discussed, like tall T waves can be there, P wave can disappear, QRS can prolong, then you can get sine wave pattern. Again, lot of arrhythmias also can occur depending on the level of the potassium level. So tall T waves, remember, wide QRS complex, remember, and third one is sine wave. And many patients can present with bradycardia also. So here you can see the patient is having wide QRS complex like a sine wave pattern. This is called a sine wave pattern, and many patients can have sometimes severe bradycardia also. So wide QRS complex, tall T waves, bradycardia, think that this patient can have hyperkalemia. Now the evaluation of hyperkalemia goes like this. Most of the time, if patient is completely asymptomatic, if you are seeing potassium, then it is mostly due to spurious hyperkalemia, that is falsely elevated potassium. That is mainly due to tight tourniquet. Tourniquet is tight means there will be breakage of RBC that can release potassium, abnormal red cell membrane, hemolysis, leukocytosis, thrombocytosis. All these things you can get abnormal serum potassium. Redistributive hyperkalemia, we already discussed what is cause for shift hyperkalemia, acidosis, hyperglycemia, beta blockers, succinylcholine, digoxin, fluoride, periodic paralysis. Periodic paralysis is a channelopathy. It can be hypokalemic or hyperkalemic. So that mainly affects the muscles. Then once you understand that this is real hyperkalemia, we have discussed the reasons for real hyperkalemia. Then if there is renal failure, GFR is very low, then we have to think about renal failure is the cause for hyperkalemia. Then sometimes it can be due to a high potassium load inside the body, or sometimes it can be a high potassium intake like fruit juices and all. And GFR is good, means more than 20 milliequivalents. Then you have to go for two important investigation, normal or high aldosterone. These are the causes. Primary tubular disorder like renal transplant, lupus erythematosus, amyloidosis, sickle cell disease, obstructive uropathy, pseudo-hypoaldosteronism, drugs like spironolactone, amiloride, all these things. Low aldosterone means again you can ask for plasma renin. Normal or high plasma renin, Addison's disease, hereditary aldosterone biosynthesis, heparin, AC inhibitors. Low aldosterone, hyporenemic hypoaldosteronism, prostaglandin synthetase inhibition, cyclosporin. All these things can produce hyperkalemia. So remember, this is a big chart. You may not be able to remember all these causes. So whenever there is hyperkalemia, if the patient is completely asymptomatic, repeat the test. Mostly it is spurious hyperkalemia. Then if the patient is having acidosis, hyperglycemia, beta blocker, toxicity, succinylcholine, digoxin, fluoride, or sudden onset of weakness, you think about periodic paralysis. Then if it is real hyperkalemia, then if there is renal failure, then renal failure is the cause for hyperkalemia. If there is no renal failure, then we have to send investigations like aldosterone, renin and all. So that will give you the diagnosis. But in clinical practice, most important cause for hyperkalemia is renal failure. Once you understand there is high potassium in patient's body, it is always better to treat the patient, because hyperkalemia and hypokalemia can produce muscle weakness, respiratory paralysis, and the patient also can develop severe type of arrhythmias. To prevent arrhythmias, we have to give calcium gluconate. Calcium directly antagonizes the membrane actions of hyperkalemia. It decreases membrane excitability. That is very important. Calcium can decrease the membrane excitability in the heart, while hypocalcemia increases the cardiotoxicity of the hyperkalemia. So calcium should be given in a patient who is having suspected ECG change. If you are seeing high potassium and if you are seeing an ECG change, calcium gluconate has to be given. Or an impending cardiac problem, if you are anticipating, then also calcium gluconate should be given. Calcium gluconate should be given as 10% solution, 10 ml over 10 minutes. This is the standard dose of calcium gluconate. This reduces the membrane excitability. The effect begins within minutes because it's a rapid acting drug, but lasts for few minutes, like 30 to 60 minutes, and the dose can be repeated if any change in ECG is seen after 5 to 10 minutes. So calcium gluconate has to be given as a first line drug in hyperkalemia. So after calcium gluconate only you should give other drugs. So first drug is calcium gluconate. Now next we can do we can give insulin dextrose infusion. It is for shifting of potassium into the cells. 25 or 50% 100 ml dextrose with 10 units of insulin should be given in patients who is having hyperkalemia. If patient is having hypoglycemia, only insulin should be given. If the patient is having hyperglycemia, only insulin should be given. If the patient is having hypoglycemia, then only dextrose also can be given. Both dextrose and insulin can reduce the potassium level. So depending on the scenario, you'll have to modify your treatment. But in a normal patient, 50% 100 ml dextrose with 10 units of insulin can be given. The effect of this one lasts for 4 to 6 hours. That is very important. This is a long-lasting treatment, can be given in almost all patients. If there is hyperglycemia, we can give only insulin. If there is hypoglycemia, we can only give dextrose. Both are equally effective, but addition of one to other one, like insulin to dextrose, will be more potent. That is advantage. Now next one is sodium bicarbonate. Routinely we don't use sodium bicarbonate in patients who is having hyperkalemia, but in a cardiac arrest due to hyperkalemia or an impending cardiac arrest, both the conditions we have to use sodium bicarbonate, because the shift of the potassium is very rapid when we give sodium bicarbonate. 7.5% 50 to 100 ml is given as a bolus and slowly over 10 to 20 minutes, followed by IV soda bicarb. In cardiac arrest, 50 milligrams IV over 5 minutes. So there you have to give rapidly. It produces rapid shift of potassium. The onset of action is 5 minutes when we are giving routinely, but it will be faster than that if we are giving IV push in cardiac arrest, and the effect lasts for 1 to 2 hours. So sodium bicarbonate should not be given unnecessarily. Only if you are suspecting a impending cardiac arrest or in cardiac arrest, we can safely give soda bicarb. Salbutamol is nebulized, which is routinely used in asthma, but here also we can give. It can be given as 10 to 20 milligram. It's a very high dose comparing to the treatment of asthma. The problem of salbutamol is many patients can develop like tremors, palpitation. So a lot of discomfort can be produced by this high dose nebulization of salbutamol. So we try to avoid this salbutamol nebulization in most of the patients because we have better drugs which can easily control hyperkalemia. But this drug has got an action on cellular uptake of potassium. So it can be tried if the patient can tolerate. Now once we have given calcium gluconate, so a membrane stabilizing agent. Then for shifting of potassium, we have given insulin dextrose infusion. The next one is removal of potassium from the body. Mainly we use furosemide, that is Lasix. 80 to 100 milligram IV can be given. That is a main drug. So when the patient is having good urine output, always try to use Lasix or furosemide that can remove potassium from the body. If the patient is anuric or there is no good urine output, then dialysis is the best choice. Hemodialysis or peritoneal dialysis can be started if the patient is having hyperkalemia and complete shutdown of urine. There Lasix may not work because complete renal shutdown, Lasix will not be effective. Cation exchange resins, like it prevents the absorption of potassium from the GI tract. We can give sodium polystyrene sulfonate. 15 gram TID is the dose. So you can give oral, perrectal or enema, all are possible. So it can be given. Sodium zirconium cyclosilicate also can be given as an alternative. But routinely we use sodium polystyrene sulfonate. Now this is the chart which help you to make a complete diagnosis of hyperkalemia and management of hyperkalemia. So you can go through this chart, whatever I explained in the previous slides. We have given it as a chart here, so you can go through that. Now again, what are the treatments we have discussed, that is given here. So you can see that first one is calcium gluconate, insulin dextrose infusion, nebulized salbutamol. In arrest or impending arrest, sodium bicarbonate. Diuretics, if diuretics are not helpful, hemodialysis. Potassium binders can be given. That can be given in all types of patients. So that also can be given. So we have discussed in detail about hyperkalemia and its management in emergency room. Thank you.